bunch of Twitter questions for Dr. Tim Ball. Our new Twitter account is twitter.com/RealAlexJones. Twitter.com/RealAlexJones. We have the Prison Planet Twitter, and we have the InfoWars Stories Twitter. They send out feeds of our articles as soon as they come out. But this one is the interactive Twitter that I'm on day and night, off and on, and that the crew is on as well. And we certainly get sent a lot of good info. There's some photos we put up there on the Twitter of myself and Dean Haglund. Before we go back to Dr. Tim Ball and ask him some of these questions and get into kind of a chronicle of the fraud, I want people to understand, if we don't get the word out about this, they win. Every time we get out and expose them and all the things they're involved in, they fail. So they're trying to go at us at the state, county, and city level. Moving quickly now before I get to the Twitter questions for Dr. Tim Ball. Sir, let's get into the fraud, because any one of these stories, and it's got to be more than 10 of them in the last week, scandals dwarfing ClimateGate, but all complementing and proving ClimateGate even more. You know, the red-handed emails of fraud. I mean, it is just mind-blowing. And as you said, this is all based on a fraud. Dr. Tim Ball.
Well, yeah, it's based on the theory or hypothesis of that that CO2 is causing climate change, warming, and then climate change. And of course, this is what the problem they got into. They chose that vehicle. And then, of course, what they had to do was to make sure that the science proved what they were claiming. And that goes completely against the normal scientific method. A scientist creates a hypothesis, then other scientists try to disprove it. What they've been doing is trying to prove it. And, of course, every time somebody asks a question, like myself, they either have to fudge the data to give a false answer or silence the person that's asking the question. And they haven't hesitated to do either of those, as you and I have discussed. And one of the things that was set up at the Climatic Research Unit was a website called Real Climate. And they talk about it in the emails, how they were the goons, they were the hit squad that covered the backs of these guys that were creating the lies and covering the falsehoods. And of course, then they also got into the problem that once they as bureaucrats, for example, Hansen at NASA GISS, once they convinced the politicians, and the politicians had put their political career on the line, then they were on the treadmill even more. They had to keep falsifying the data, even though evidence continued to come out that the science was completely wrong.
But now a lot of the top scientists who've even been supporting this are coming out and saying, I guess it is okay to have a scientific debate. That is the scientific method.
Well, exactly, but one of the things that's very interesting about this, and I wrote an article in Canada Free Press a little while ago about it, and that is the degree to which these people were able to bully individuals and powerful people at corporations and governments.
Because they had the government purse strings.
Oh, exactly. They could use, I know, for example, in Canada, they would put out documents, and of course the Canadian public have a much greater faith in in government stuff than Americans do. You've got a healthy disrespect for government, which is great. But yeah, they could use the taxpayers' money to lie to them. And so they got on this treadmill, but what's gradually happened, of course, and now all those scientists that were bullied into silence, and I can't tell you how many that spoke to me, Alex. I remember government employees, I give a presentation after this, they said, we agree with you, but we're afraid to say anything.
So that's why this is imploding so badly for them now, is so many people were tired of being bullied. More stuff's getting leaked literally every day, devastating them more and more. So what do you think they're going to do as all the fraud just mounts? It already has, to just completely biblical proportions. What are they going to do? Just rebrand it and keep stealing?
Well, the first thing that's going to happen is already happening, and that is they're appointing, they're doing the old phony thing of, we'll have a commission of inquiry.
The Warren Commission or the 9/11 Commission. Or
Exactly. Okay, and as I think we might have talked about, I've served on these commissions, and I realize that they're the perfect vehicle for politicians to avoid an issue, to push it aside, because while the commission's in they say to the media, well, I can't talk about it till we get the report, but But what I found out with the very first commission I was on, that the terms of reference that they wrote meant that I couldn't possibly reach to get to the truth.
Well, that's like the 9/11 Commission said. We know 19 hijackers did this, and all we're doing is recommending what should be done, and then that was pure police state.
Yep. Yep, and it's in the terms of reference that this is how they control these commissions. The commission looks like it's nice. Oh, it's arm's length. No, we're not controlling it. But in fact, they're controlling it through the terms of reference. And the classic story when they asked Judge Warren about the Kennedy assassination, he said, well, what about the mafia in Dallas? And he said, well, that wasn't in my terms of reference. And bingo, I knew exactly what he was saying, and because I'd gone through that. But they look like they're good things. Now, what they're setting up in Britain, they're doing one. They've already appointed somebody to look at the climatic research.
And he's one of the top global warming people.
Exactly. Exactly. This is part of the continued cover-up, and so that will be the first thing. But as the leaks and as the information come out, and what's interesting with this, Alex, is you look at the Pew Center poll that came out recently, where it showed that in a list of 21 concerns, global warming was the very dead last, and it was only a concern for 28% of the people, and yet the politicians are ignoring that. In the same way that you see it in the U.S., the anger amongst the people about what's going on, and yet it's being ignored. The politicians are not listening to the public voice. Now, one of the reasons that's gone on is because the politicians were terrified that somebody was able to say, oh, well, you don't care about the environment. You don't care about the children. This was the emotional blackmail that went on. And Michael Crichton wrote about this in his book, State of Fear. How they use this to manipulate the politicians, and the only politician in the world that had the guts to stand up was Václav Klaus of the Czech Republic.
And he said this is a criminal takeover of all the resources by a new Soviet.
Well, exactly, and I remember listening to him in New York at the first World Conference of the so-called skeptics, and he said, we've gone through 70 years of communism. Why the hell would you want to go back to that?
But now they repackage it as loving liberalness, but it's the big banks financing it because they want a controlled market. Government, absolute government, can give them absolute monopolies. I want to throw out questions to you from some of the Twitter people.
Sure.
Because we have the new Twitter account, twitter.com/RealAlexJones. Folks sign up there for real-time interaction. Somebody wants to ask you about the polar shift and the elites using this control on us. I mean, I know they admit they have some tectonic weapons they claim they have, but I don't think there's any proof that they could cause a polar shift. But we do know that naturally happens, and I've read reports that the poles have been moving lately more than they had previously.
Yeah, the magnetic pole rotates or in a circle over a period of time around the true pole, and yes, there was a fairly rapid movement of it. I think about 10 years ago, it was centered in King William Island in the Canadian Arctic, and it's been tracking south. But the rate of that movement of that pole is variable, and this is
that's a normal wobble. So when the media says, "Oh my God, the pole's moving," that's normal.
Yeah. Now, what is important is, and I raised this before a parliamentary committee 20 years ago, and I did it sort of tongue-in-cheek at the time, trying to explain to them how science works with hypothesis. We know the strength of the Earth's magnetic field has been weakening for about 1,000 years. And some people think that this is heading towards a polar reversal. That is, the magnetic poles literally flip. So the South Pole becomes the North Pole magnetically and vice versa. And I raised it, as I said, tongue-in-cheek at a parliamentary committee, saying, look, I can stand up here all day and create scary scenarios. Which one are you going to deal with? Because you've got to set some priorities here. And this is part of the game that's being played, by the way, and how the fear distorts the priority list.
What about the UN a few days ago? First Danny Glover, now UN spokesman, saying global warming caused the plate shift that caused the earthquake in Haiti 2.5 weeks ago. I mean, I'm no climatologist, but I mean, I've read the science. No one has ever said that the atmosphere is in any way a driver of tectonic plates floating around on the mantle.
Well, the only way that there can be any possible connection is that the atmosphere creates the winds, and the winds drive the ocean currents at the surface, but they don't drive the deep ocean currents, and you can get situations where water can pile up in a particular area because of the wind patterns, but those are relatively constant. But when we're talking about movement of the tectonic plates, we're talking about movement within the mantle of the Earth, that is underneath the crust. And
the bottom line is I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, am I right? It's ridiculous. It's literally out of left field to say earthquakes are man's carbon dioxide and cows farting.
Oh, it's absolute rubbish. And as I said, we could spend all day creating these kind of scary scenarios, and